transparency and the democratic institutions of a country under the People's Progressive Party civic administration. Guyanese, Guyana stands at a critical moment in its history. Our country is experiencing unprecedented economic expansion driven by our oil resources. We must point out, for clarity, that the PPP did not create the economic boom we are experiencing, and their claim to and the execution of governance is misplaced and tremendously faulty. At the very same time that our national wealth is growing, the democratic institutions designed to protect your rights are being systematically eroded and thus weakened. Whenever those institutions are used, those attempts are biased and very prejudiced. Democracy does not survive on economic growth alone, as you may well understand. It survives on transparency, accountability, fairness, and respect for those institutions. Those pillars are continually under serious threat and continue to affect us under this PPC government. Over the past several years, we have witnessed a very troubling pattern, a troubling pattern of governance under this government, a pattern that seeks to centralize power, control the national narrative, weaken independence, and weaken oversight, until the democratic playing field in the favor of the ruling party. One of the clearest examples of this democratic imbalance is the misuse of state media. Frankly speaking, the dictatorial, self-serving use of the National Communications Network, NCN. International elections observers have already warned the nation about this problem. The European Union Observation Mission reported that Guyana's media landscape during the last election was highly polarized and that the state-owned media overwhelmingly favored the PPPC government. That government is evil and willing to go to any length to dictate to and dominate people. Monitoring conducted by the EU observers found that the state broadcasters, including, as I said, NCN, the Voice of Guyana, dedicated about 92 to 98% of the majority of election-related coverage to the government, while opposition voices were given minimal exposure. This must stop. State media funded by taxpayers must serve the entire nation and not operate as a propaganda arm of the PPPC. Starbuck News is going out of business and is owed over $80 million. And no doubt, the trajectory leading them out of the market is as a direct result of what is owed to them. Guyanese, daily we continue to see decisions by the PPPC government that reinforces the bias. For example, there's been instances where only the state broadcaster, NCN, was allowed to cover important parliamentary proceedings, while independent media outlets were excluded. The PPPC's actions undermine transparency and deny Guyanese people the full and balanced information they deserve. And equally troubling are the broader concerns raised by the international observers about the fairness of the political environment in Guyana. Reports from the International Election Observation Missions have highlighted the misuse of state resources, weakened campaign finance regulation, and unequal access to media as problems that give the PPPC government an unfair advantage. When a government has an unfair advantage, they use it against the people. These are not wild claims, Guyanese brothers and sisters. These are the findings documented by respected international institutions that monitor democratic standards around the world. And despite these warnings and recommendations, the PPC administration has failed to implement meaningful reforms that would level the playing field and strengthen public confidence in our democratic systems. The problem goes even deeper than media bias or election rules. It extends to broader weakening of institutions that are meant to safeguard accountability. While in opposition from 2015 to 2020, This very PPPC government was loud and repetitive about the good governance and what it should be. And now in government, they are enemies of those very statements. When the executive arm of government dominates state resources, influences public institutions, and controls the information environment, the citizens are trapped and democracy itself becomes very fragile. In Region 6, the PPC-dominated Regional Democratic Council moved a motion quite recently to eliminate the statutory provision which allowed urgent matters to be discussed. Now, opposition councillors have to write to the clerk of the council at least 1 hour before meetings to raise urgent issues affecting our brothers and sisters in the ancient county. Guyana's rapid economic transformation makes the protection of democratic institutions even more urgent, so the small man is protected. And as we all know too well, the small man is the real man. Countries blessed with natural resources often face the risk of what economists call the resource curse, where wealth becomes centralized, institutions to steer the government clear of that. Guyana must not follow that path. Instead, our oil wealth should strengthen democracy, strengthen institutions, and improve the lives of Guyanese, regardless of race, class, or political affiliation, and position government as a facilitator of quality life and freedoms. The APNU coalition, therefore, calls for urgent reforms to protect the democratic framework of our nation. And finally, we believe state media must be governed by clear legislation, guaranteeing equal access to fair coverage for all of our political parties. We believe also that Guyana must establish strong and enforceable campaign finance reform legislation and regulations to prevent the misuse of state resources. We believe electoral and constitutional institutions must operate with full independence and transparency. On Wednesday, we raised the alarm over the delays of the Constitution. We raised alarm over the delays in the Constitution of parliamentary committees. The Parliament is the highest and most effective body of government and for scrutiny and the representation of the people. Good governance is under repeated threat. Let us be clear, this is not simply a dispute between government and opposition. This is about freedoms you should be enjoying as Guyanese and the questionable future of our democracy here in Guyana. The institutions that protect freedoms and fairness and accountability were built for the benefit of you, the people. Those institutions must not be dismantled piece by piece in the pursuit of political dominance. The APNU coalition, we remain firmly committed to defending our democracy, strengthening our government and governance, and ensuring that the benefits of Guyana's development are shared by all of our people. And we call on all Guyanese and civil society, the private sector and independent media as well, and the international community as a stakeholder to join us in protecting our democratic institutions. APNU is committed to providing leadership on these issues, and we advocate that citizens be involved in the path this takes us as a nation. We must engage now or suffer in the long term. Guyanese, we lost 2 children very recently in bachelor's adventure, and my colleague Ganesh Maipal is going to speak to this at length. And there are concerns about the lack of thoroughness as a result, before and even now in the aftermath of the PPPC as it relates to project execution. APNU has had to condemn the rushed and inferior approach of this government to one too many of these projects. Too many poor quality processes are in place. And after the fact, measures are being put in place to apply as precautions. The safety protocol must be a priority with the simplest of projects executed by the government. We are concerned for the future of our children, as you can imagine, because welfare officers were recently seen dragging a child on the road for several meters. And again, I know my colleague Danish Mai Paul will deal with this extensively. And it is telling of the weakness of our systems. We need to strengthen institutions and our public servants. And so, rather, our public servants will continue to deliver skilled services to the people. Governance is best for the people when it cares. But this government is focused on pursuing dominance over the people. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shanika, and good morning to members of the press and the viewing public. Let me start by addressing a matter of grave concern at the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security, and that is the Public Assistance Program. This program is not serving its intended purpose, and what it should be doing. The system allows for the Board of Guardians in the respective areas to approve citizens who meet the criteria. But the board is stacked, the various boards across the country. It is stacked with PPPC members and people associated with the PPPC. And they are deliberately not approving applications of citizens they perceive to be non-supporters of the People's Progressive Party. And in most cases, Afro-Guyanese are complaining bitterly of not receiving approval for public assistance, especially in cases where they satisfy the criteria. We have several reports from various Guyanese across Guyana bringing to our attention that they are not being approved for public assistance. The public assistance program, as we all know, is not intended to be a lifelong support base for Guyanese. It is intended to assist Guyanese, especially where they find difficulty in meeting their expenses when they are deemed to be unable to work. We have several cases of people reporting that they have met with accidents and it caused them to not provide for their family. A recent case was brought to our attention just this morning pertaining to an individual who broke his leg and has to cater for 5 people, his wife and 4 children, and when he applied, he was turned down. It must also be mentioned that in 2020, Minister Vindhya Prasad said to this nation that of the 11,900 persons who are recipients of public assistance, that they will be catered for and transition into the various programs at the ministry so that they can become work-oriented and able to provide for their families, such as the Board of Industrial Training will train them to, various upskilling and so on. So we were expecting to see, based on her report, a reduction in the number of people for public assistance and the periodic approval for their for the provision of these public assistance. From 2020 to now, we have over 50,000 people who are recipients of public assistance. Some of these people are receiving public assistance for over 5 years straight, 5 years. Majority of the people who are on these respective boards of guardian are giving public assistance to their family, and they do not meet the criteria. They are causing several residents to come up in arm against the system because it is not functioning the way it ought to function. The requirement of a citizen who believes he or she meets the criteria and is turned down needs to appeal the decision to the Poor Law Commission. The Poor Law Commission has been in existence, the most recent one, since 2020. And we are told that the Poor Law Commission does not meet frequently. That's the first point. And secondly, when they do, they oftentimes uphold the decision of the boards of guardian, because that Poor Law Commission is also stacked with several PPP people. We are calling on Minister Vindhya Prasad to immediately look at the public assistance program and fix it. Let it serve its intended purpose, and let the people who are deserving of public assistance receive their public assistance. And if they do fix that program, we are going to see a significant amount of people who are on the list currently removed from the list, and several people who are deserving to be on the list of recipients for public assistance be on the list. And when you do a careful analysis and audit of the situation, it can also lead to significant increases in the public assistance so that people can actually benefit meaningfully. As I am on the Minister and Ministry of Human Service and Social Security, I would also like to speak to the dragging of that school child on the road at Stabrook area. We have received reports also that at the Child Care and Protection Agency, there are several officers who have been catapulted to senior positions within the Child Care and Protection Agency, and they do not possess the necessary practical training skills to handle situation on the ground. Yes, they are social workers who have passed various online courses and the like to be associated with child care and protection matters, and they have been good in their theory, but they lack the practical experience, and that is why we are seeing situations such as this. It is out of order for Minister Vindhya Prasad to say that she has inherited a broken system. She has been sitting there for the past 6 years. And if it is indeed that she has inherited a broken system, it was she who broke it. And it is she who must now leave it and get somebody else to fix it. You cannot speak about inheriting a broken system when you were sitting there for 6 years. No other ministry has seen so many staff members leaving and complaining because of bitter treatment, because of politicking in the ministry, and because of favoring people who are associated to her above professional and technical people. The Ministry of Human Services and Social Security is not a political ministry per se. It is a ministry that ought to look after people's interests. It ought to focus on human services and social security for all Guyanese. And so far, it is quite clear that that minister and the ministry have failed to satisfy their basic mandate. If Minister Vindhya Prasad cannot come to grip and accept that she's failing at that ministry, then she is basically useless in that position. I know she's doing a good job at the Guyana Hindu Dharmic Sabha, and perhaps there is where she should return and stay and allow the ministry to be run by a competent person who will deliver service to the population of Guyana. I now turn my attention to the Small Miners Association in this country, especially those in Region 9 that are expressing great dissatisfaction at what seems to be an intended visit by Minister Vikram Bharat to Region 9, more so the South Rupununi, and he is expected to go there to seek approval from the Tushaus, 14 Tushaus in the South District, to give the Marudi Mountain area a lease to a Brazilian entity. The small miners are complaining bitterly that they are being left behind, that they are not being catered for, and that the Ministry of Natural Resources seem not to be interested in addressing their plight as they struggle to make ends meet. I remind Minister Vikram Bharat that the budget's theme is putting people first. The small miners are claiming that they are not being put first, they are not being considered, and that the government, the People's Progressive Party, is more focused on putting monies into the pockets of large companies and large businesses, large mining companies, because doing that guarantees them, the government that is, a drawback and filling their pockets. We are calling on Minister Vikram Bharat to be more lenient and cautious in his operation and consider the small miners of Guyana, for they too must live. They too have a right to build their businesses, to build their operations, and to build themselves in our Guyana. I turn my attention to the issue at with the Guyana Water Incorporated. The two beautiful children, Jaden and Tiana the Court of Melanie East Coast Demerara, who lost their lives. The APNU previously expressed condolences and sympathy, and I'd like to reiterate that we do sincerely express our deepest condolences to the family, but we are hurt and we are angry at the same time with the executing agency, that being the Guyana Water Incorporated, and at the government's negligence in how they treat construction work across this country. Clearly, occupational health and safety measures are not a priority in the government agenda as they execute these various projects across Guyana. We believe that the monitoring of these projects also is not of importance to this government, and it should not be like that. The executing agency has a mandate, has a responsibility to ensure that precautions are taken and that we operate in such a way that we try our best to remove the likelihood of these kind of activities occurring. You know, I remember when I did my driving tests, the theoretical part of my driving test, and I was told by the lecturer at the time that when you are driving on the road, you must consider yourself as the only sensible person, and every other being on the road in a vehicle, they are not as sensible as you. And it is in that same context that I want to say to the government of Guyana that when you're executing these projects, you must consider yourself as the entity to take all necessary precautions, because you never know what can happen. It is sad that this has happened. It is not the first time something like this has happened in our country, where people, and more so children, lost their lives because of this kind of neglect, this kind of incompetence, and this kind of non-focus on occupational health and safety measures and proper monitoring techniques at the various projects that are being executed. I therefore call on government to up their game and ensure that they focus on putting measures in place to safeguard our children and Guyanese as a whole when you're executing these projects. Several people are complaining that several projects in their respective areas are moving very slow, and in some cases, they are creating great inconvenience to their livelihood. That should not be. I now turn my attention to the Citizens Connect app, which was launched a couple of days ago, which I do believe is a good initiative. But what will make it fail is the fact that there are several incompetent people in these various ministries, departments, and agencies. And because there are several square pegs in wrong hole, the matters that will be brought to the attention of these various ministries will not be addressed in a timely manner, and we will have people who are not qualified and capable to handle the job. When you take political people and put them in positions of service providers, they will be partisan in how they execute their functions, which we have seen over the years with the People's Progressive Party. So to fix the public service doesn't simply require putting a Citizens Connect app in place. It requires hiring professional people. It requires ensuring that the public service of itself is fixed, and it requires paying people livable wages to make them happy so that they can deliver service comfortably to the Guyanese people. And finally, I remind President Irfan Ali that in December of 2025, he said, and I quote, "We have triangulated the entire licensing process, and where discrepancies exist, action will be taken. Those who obtain the license without meeting the requirements have 6 weeks to surrender them. After that, we will publish the names, suspend the license, and prosecute all involved," unquote. Irfan Ali, 6 weeks ended in January of 2026. There is no list of names published. I don't know if it is because Irfan Ali may have seen his own name on the list that he's not publishing it, or because there are several friends, family, and favorites of the People's Progressive Party on the list. But I remind him, you cannot promise the Guyanese accountability, transparency, and good governance in words, and when it comes to you delivering via action, you go silent. Fix the system, fix the country. You're there for that purpose. I thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I will open the floor for questions on the press statements. Mr. Adam Harris.
Good morning, all. There are a couple of things that I'd like to know, but I'll start with the last point Mr. Maipol made about President Ali making a statement and not fulfilling it. Sir, this is not the first promise, as far as I can remember. There have been many, and we keep issuing calls for him to keep his promises. Is there nothing better we can do?
Thank you, Adam. The people of Guyana, they can do several things. They have to decide whether they're going to allow Irfan Ali to continue to strive on uptick politics, or they're going to hold him accountable for his words. He continued, indeed, as you rightly said, to promise and make promises to do things, and then in actuality, we don't see anything happening. I merely am reminding the population that it is he who, in his attempt to quell the situation at that time in December when road fatalities and several accidents were dominating, made this commitment, putting hope in the eyes of people. And here we are, more than 6 weeks after, we're in the month of March, and he cannot satisfy what he claimed was a triangulation. In fact, those were his exact words, a triangulation of the entire licensing system. And everybody, all Guyanese, I think they were optimistic and wanted to see what really is transpiring at the level of the Guyana Police Force and the Guyana Revenue Authority with the issuance of license, because several of the accidents were committed by young people, many of them ranging between the age of 20 to 25. And we wanted to know what really was indeed happening there. And here is it that the president had the audacity to speak to the matter, made a promise and a commitment, and to date has not delivered. It is not the first time, indeed, several other instances we can make reference to. But unless we remind him, Adam, unless we remind the nation, we as Guyanese tend to forget easily. So reminding is option one. But outside of that, to your question, Guyanese, they can do several things. Thank you.
Adam,
that brings us to the point. Sorry.
Adam, if I can add to that very question that you asked MP Ganesh Mahipal, 2 Christmases ago, the president promised a national conversation on road safety. And that conversation is still pending. I mean, road fatalities go up every single day. Our thoughts and prayers are with the family that lost a young daughter, I think a 15-year-old, and a husband yesterday. A 12-year-old is battling for his life at hospital. But we don't see any movements in terms of a holistic plan of how do we improve road usage in this country. And Pagua Day of itself was a day replete with so many instances of poor usage of the road. And clearly, we need a plan on this. For instance, we know that there's a number of speed cameras that are on the road. But besides telling us any given week, they get a police force, how many persons were speeding, we don't know how many persons are being prosecuted successfully using those cameras that are set up at various points throughout this country. And even when those cameras are set up there, how have we seen a decrease in speeding? If you're saying that is one of the mechanisms, are we seeing a decrease in speeding? I don't see a decrease in the number of police roadblocks or policemen on the road stopping cars or that kind of thing. So we need a broader conversation that we have been having, and I agree with the MP fully on this issue. The promises are there, but then when you measure them, you always find this government wanting. And that's going to continue to haunt us for a very long time.
I don't want, Adam, us to utilize all the time on the matter, but something that also struck me is when I drive on the east coast of Demerara, the old line top, and I see how they have expanded the road there, the road network, and I look at how close the road is to people's homes, it is kind of frightening too. I don't know what kind of plan this government is working with, but I fear to live so close to a major road network. I fear to live so close to ongoing and incoming traffic. So I don't know what is it that the government is really doing, if they're waking up one morning and deciding that, well, we're going to expand here or we're going to expand there, and they're doing so many expansions and so on. If it's done within the purview of understanding the boundaries, understanding the importance of distance and where traffic must flow versus where people can walk, where people live, and all of these things. I don't know if we are creating an environment where we are going to have unnecessary accidents and so on, but all of these things require good planning. It requires professionals to guide, and it requires surveys and studies to be done. We must not see surveys and studies as a waste of resource. We must see it as meaningful investment to give us great returns in the end.
Thank you.
All right, nobody else ready. We talked about sorry.
Go ahead.
We talked about social services and what have you. There's an interesting development. We say we are building many more health facilities, hospitals and centers, what have you. At the same time, we have cut off the source of training and acquisition of health people when we seem to be dropping the Cubans. Is there a reaction to this? I've seen precious little in the public domain.
Adam, we are indeed expanding our health services by the construction of several hospitals and health centers and the like. But I don't think we are in the same vein expanding the training to the extent of moving beyond the theory. I have no issues with these online training programs and these online classes and online way of how people are achieving their academic upliftment, certificates, diplomas, degrees, and the like. But nothing for me can replace physical presence at a university or at an institution where you get to interact with fellow human beings during the courses and where you get to be exposed to practical skills in labs and so on as you perform your function. I have found that physical presence has tremendous benefits. And I will use your question to, at this time, call on institutions such as the University of Guyana and other facilities, especially those that certify medical practitioners, to engage more in physical training, not to do away with theoretical training via online platforms, but engage in more physical training so that we can better equip our men and women who are in the medical fraternity and other programs also to better serve the people of Guyana and take up the positions that are available at these respective institutions that are being constructed so that the service is not just seen as good buildings, but can be measured by good service being provided to the citizenry of the country. The Cubans have done fantastically well for Guyana. I agree with you. And I do believe that there has to be a discussion surrounding how we move towards not necessarily replacing, but filling the gap to ensure that our health sector is compensated with adequate personnel to deliver good health services.
And the point Ganesh raises is a very important point. We sat and heard in the National Assembly, very erroneously, the government said quite recently that Guyanese are no longer going to bump in for medical care. And that is not so. Guyanese still pour over the borders in Region 9 by the thousands to receive health care in Brazil because it's much better health care than is had here. And the MP is right again in terms of filling the gap. Nobody would contest the quality health care you would get in terms of the tutoring, in terms of the literature and everything else with our Cuban health professionals. Nobody would doubt that. It's whether we can fill the gap with equally astute personnel. That is important. And as well, I don't want to hear Frank Anthony or Vindia come in the National Assembly. We don't want to hear them say the system has improved. Let us employ, since we have the oil money now, independent organizations who can do that work, who can come in very quietly, analyze the system, appraise the system, and tell us on a yearly basis how the quality of service that is being given at our institutions is important. That is what matters, and not what, because we know the government can parse the language. We know they can play the politics on us. We want to see independent organization, and there are many of them out there who can do this kind of qualitative work and tell us how we are improving this system.
And you know, Adam, before you go or anybody else comes in, we have to also be cognizant of the fact that building several hospitals and health facilities, that's one thing. But people go to health facilities because they may have health complications or accidents, medical checkups, and so on. But we have to have a holistic approach as a government so that we can minimize the amount of people who go to health facilities. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if you have an agriculture ministry that seeks to promote organic food, that seeks to promote healthy eating, that seeks to promote planting your own food, growing your own food in a more in a broader scale so that people will take good care of themselves, so that they will live healthier lifestyles. If we have a Ministry of Health that focuses on educating and sensitizing a nation on the value and importance of exercising, if we have a Ministry of Home Affairs that speaks to road traffic and safety measures in a greater scope, if we seek to address at public works the construction of these roadways in such a way that we have proper signage, we have all the different necessary things to reduce accidents. The government has to work in a holistic pattern so that we don't show off constructing 50 more hospitals, but yet people are dominating the 50 more hospitals. Is that what we want? Do we want the hospitals to be filled? Do we want people to visit the hospitals frequently? Or do we want them to live healthier lifestyles? And do we want them to live longer so that they don't necessarily have to depend on hospital care or hospice care? So the government has to function more holistic and together in conjunction with one another to better the lifestyles of Guyanese. And instead of showing off perhaps the construction of several hospitals, we can show off the construction of a better University of Guyana, an expanded university in Region 2, in Region 10. We can divert resources to more meaningful, not that hospitals aren't, they are, but institutions that can uplift our people, more technical institutions across the country that can train our citizens in various skills. Those who may not be academically inclined, they can learn a trade. Expanding the board of industrial training. So we have to measure our work differently. And we can't have one ministry celebrating one set of hospitals while another ministry is actually doing little to nothing, causing people to go to these hospitals.
Thank you. All right. Miss Divina Bagot, I'll take your question.
Good morning, Divina Bagot with Kaiser News. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Okay. I want to take us back to MP Sherrod Duncan's statement that he presented earlier. Mr. Duncan, do you plan to take any further action in relation to the Speaker's rejection of your motion on media access to Parliament?
Divina, good morning and thank you for your question. Yes, Divina, we are a political party and all of the tools in our tool chest will be used. Our local parliament is part of several parliaments internationally, and the whip will be writing to those parliaments about the descent of our parliament into autocracy and not broadening the democratic process. And so we will be looking at this. Another aspect of it is resubmitting this motion. This is a tremendously important issue to all Guyanese. This is unheard of. Media houses being locked out of the National Assembly. And while that is being done, MP Ganesh Maipal wrote extensively this very week about committees in the National Assembly not meeting. And this is why they don't want the media in the National Assembly. These are the issues they don't want reported on. And so much else is happening or not happening in the National Assembly. If the government claims they have this robust agenda, parliamentary agenda, why wouldn't they want the most extensive media coverage that there is for this agenda? If they have committees and the work we're doing in the committees is supposed to be doing, filtering into the work of the larger National Assembly that is going to be scrutinized in these sittings of the 13th Parliament, why wouldn't you want the media houses there? It makes no sense. And the point of the matter that we raise as well is just to say that this motion contains inaccuracies and biases. It is not to do it justice, where the Speaker does not even point out where that is concerned. But we understand what is happening here. The speaker is taking a cop out because the government does not want scrutiny of their work and oversight in the National Assembly. He is playing politics in this regard. That is our consideration on this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you. And earlier you spoke about government's lack of transparency at a time when the nation's oil sector is rapidly expanding. How does APNU intend to press government in this regard? And are you concerned at all about the lack of press conferences that we're seeing right now by the administration, as well as post-cabinet briefings, which have been dormant since this party returned to office?
Yeah. And all of this concerns scrutiny. I mean, we've raised this in the National Assembly. I have no doubt my whip is going to jump in. But for instance, we used to have some quote unquote end of year press conferences, even if we didn't have access to the ministers on a daily basis. Now, I saw just two ministries, interestingly, in 2025. I saw the Ministry of Housing. The minister gave, I think, a 27 minutes video statement. There was no media interaction. And then I saw the Minister of Agrarian Affairs spoke about 13 minutes in another video statement, and that was the sum total of end-of-year press conferences for the government, and all of it is to avoid scrutiny. Now, if you're doing all this work and you're putting people first, wouldn't you want to engage the public? Wouldn't you want to engage members of the media fraternity to tell of all this goodness that you're doing out there? And the fact that they're shying away from really robust engagement with meaningful media houses like yours, Davina. I hope that they're paying you guys too, and you don't end up like Sabbath News. I would hate for that to happen, because you know that Kaito News, I think you're still with Kaito News, is one of those last really and truly great newspapers in this country that has really stood in defense of the people of this country for a very long time. So I hope they're paying you guys the ad money that they owe y'all. But this is why we believe that they're not having these post-cabinet briefings. And we believe really and truly that Mr. Jagdew has run out of steam, and so he has run off of his Thursday press conference briefing. Because it's only so long you can bluff, you know. It's only so long. But we want the robust engagement with the media, and that is why, as a government or as an opposition, we like it as a government, that we never shy away from engaging the media consistently on matters of national interest, as against on the sidelines of meetings or conferences or something else. The media barely getting some face time with government ministers who are handling billion-dollar portfolios. All the more reason why we should have seen an acceleration, a proliferation of engagement with government ministers and the government by and large with media houses through press conferences, through all of those engagements you have outlined. And we are seeing a significant diminution of those engagements, sadly.
Davina, I will only add to what Sherrod has said to say to you that as long as government officials are hiding from media scrutiny, it means that they're engaged in crookish behavior and they are afraid of being exposed for their corrupt practices. As long as you're a government official and you are prepared to face the media, it means that you are honest in your dealings. But if you are going to run away from the media and escape media scrutiny, means you're in crookish activities. You spoke about the oil sector and the oil boom with the monies that we're getting from the oil sector. A responsible government would have told its people what are the specific projects the oil monies are being spent on. We don't see that. And it goes to a broader thing that is something that I should address also. All monies that are considered as revenue to the country should be in the consolidated fund. All monies that are revenue should go into the consolidated fund. And at the time of budget preparation and budget passage to the National Assembly, monies are taken out or should be taken out from the consolidated fund and associated itself to various ministries, departments, and agencies. We don't see that with this government. We have several agencies that are generating revenue and they are not being placed in the consolidated fund. So when it comes now to budget scrutiny, these agencies get away because the speaker claims that they are not receiving funds from the consolidated fund. That was experienced at the last budget estimates that we had the consideration. When you look at the Guyana Gold Board, when you look at several other statutory agencies, because they generate their own fund and then they move into allocating back for the new year, their presence in the national budget books is just for information purpose. What nonsense is that? You are supposed to take all the revenue from these state agencies and put it into the consolidated fund. You're supposed to, as the Minister of, was it Finance with Responsibility? Minister of something of Responsibility for Finance. His name so long that he doesn't even have the height for the name. But the point I am making is that as the senior minister, you're supposed to tell this nation the sum total of the consolidated fund so we know how much money we have as a nation. But there's several various operations going on, and that is where the thievery, that's where the public thievery is also happening. I've spoken about the Lotto Fund. Every year prior to 2020, from 2015 to 2020, the Lotto Fund has been putting into the consolidated fund 600 million, 700 million, and thereabout. Last year, I think they only put $300 million. So where is excess money gone? What have they been using the Lotto Fund to do? This government must come clean with the Guyanese people. The Lotto funds generate billions of dollars, and it is used as a slush fund to facilitate activities of this government, and I believe they're pocketing money from it too. We need to have an audit of the Lotto Fund. We need to know where the monies are going, and we need to ensure that all monies generated as revenue from all the agencies across the country, they go into the consolidated fund, and then it is being put to various ministries as expenditure in respective budgets going forward. We don't have such a system. It is a practice right now that facilitates corruption. It facilitates non-transparency and unaccountability, and it's a great shame on the government for having such a practice.
Yes. And Divina, in addition to that, we know how Culture News has been on the forefront of highlighting what is happening in the oil and gas sector, the oil sector in particular now in this country, and it's to the credit of the great newspaper that Culture News is. But we want to underscore too that we're hopeful that independent entities like the EITI continue to do their work, and the government allows them to be independent in giving oversight to this extractive industry sector. I was aghast, as much as the nation was, to hear the Minister with Responsibility for this sector, Vikram Bharat, state that to bring the Petroleum Commission into operationalization would be to slow down the pace of the industry. As my colleague Maipal said, MP Maipal, what utter nonsense is this? And the government should spare no effort. This is meant to be an oversight body for this sector, and to say it will slow down the pace of the work is to want to avoid scrutiny. And we know lots of what is happening, for instance, as our colleague outlined so eloquently, in Marudi Mountain is a lot of corruption where a lot of government officials have interests through their Brazilian counterpart in the mining operations there. And now they're even trying to squeeze out the small miners from earning and living in this country. And so if we really want oversight, No government worth their salt would be saying that they are not going to operationalize the Petroleum Commission. And is this lack of oversight that the government seems to, this area of darkness that they seem to shine most prevalently in, to use an oxymoron there. And as my learned colleague Anish Maipal said, in speaking to this whole issue of the Citizens Connect app, is the very same thing we're seeing with a lack of oversight and running from oversight. Why this government that passed legislation along with the competent opposition we have, the Data Protection Act in 2023 and the Digital ID Act in 2023 as well, have failed to date to issue the commencement orders for these two pieces of legislation. Why? Because they don't want oversight, they don't want scrutiny, they don't want people to have any recourse for how the government is dealing with data collection. And I stand with my colleague when he says he welcomes such initiative as this Citizens App. But the use of the data, and we saw it in the last elections, as we said, the EU and the Commonwealth Observer missions, they pronounced on this matter, how citizens' data was used and misused in the last election. As the shame of any government that passed legislation that are still languishing, inactivated on the books, and our citizens' data is being misused. But it's this larger notion of trying to avoid scrutiny and accountability and good governance that we see across every single sector in this country.
And just to add to what to add to Ravina's question as well, the Partnership for National Unity, we are going to continue to hold the government of Guyana accountability. It is very imperative for us to do, mainly because we've seen that it is the livelihood of the people of Guyana that are not benefited from the oil boom or from the oil resources of Guyana. Also, I want to say kudos again to Kaitro News, who continues to be one of the pillars of Guyana's media landscape, because they continue to highlight the plights of the people. They continue to show where the oil resources is going and where it's not going. But also, the government, they have equipped some other media entities. This is not just about politics, MP Sharon and MP Maipa, but also they have equipped these media entities against the people of Guyana, not to show the actual reality that the people are facing in Guyana. Like, for example, we are not going to see every single day media entities show that Minister Zulfikar Mustafa's son has 2,359 prime acres in Mazaruni mining. They are not going to show these things, understand? They are going to just come out there and show the people of Guyana what they want us to, what they want them to see. It is very axiomatic of what the government of Guyana is doing, especially when it comes to the media. So we must say that we are going to continue to hold the government of Guyana accountable. We are going to continue to fight for the people from Burima straight down to Mackenzie in Guyana. We are going to continue to highlight the plight that the people face in Guyana.
Thank you. At this time, I have two questions that I will read from Mr. Antonio Day of Nightly News. One moment. He has asked, there is a health and sanitation crisis at the Stabroek market, and monies were allocated towards the rehabilitation of the municipality markets. What is the situation in this regard? That's the first question. And second question being, how is the preparation going thus far for the local government elections?
Let me jump in before MP Ganesh Maipal comes in there on the market issue. Suffice to come back to the data, the Citizens Connect app. Now, if citizens had raised these market repairs through this app, we need our markets repaired, and monies are voted in to repair these markets, right? Who is there? Who is the entity behind the app that is facilitating the speedy response to these queries or recommendations that are coming in? And allow MP to take it from there.
Well, I will start by saying that I think these markets have been well ventilated in the public space, but nothing is wrong reiterating that there are several markets across Guyana where monies were budgeted last year and spent out. And we do not see the equivalent work being done with the associated sums. Stabroek Market, for example, $200 million in 2025 was spent out. And the claim is that that money was spent on the roof of the market. Priya Manik-Chan in Budget 2026 said that after they're finished with the roof, then they're going to look at the rafters. I don't know where she got that from, because isn't the rafters a part of the roof? But the fact of the matter remains that I think a lot of thievery is going on with the sums that are associated to these various markets. I think that monies were hidden from the people of Guyana in 2025 under this line of fixing markets, and it may have been used to facilitate their elections. It requires an audit. I have no faith in the Audit Office of Guyana currently. I know that the Auditor General is seeking a 2 years extension to his tenure, and he may be singing to the tune of the People's Progressive Party because he's hoping for that extension. It is the sad reality that $74 million more in 2026 have been added to this $200 million. So now we have $274 million for Stabroek Market, and we are not seeing the equivalent work going on. The health and sanitation crisis there is a sad one. I trust that nothing of great health impact will occur, because it will only suffer the ordinary hardworking Guyanese who ply their trade in that area. I hope that it is being looked at from the health perspective, and the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development, more so Priya Manik-Chan, would come off of optic politics and actually start working for the people of Stabroek Market. But it's not just the Stabroek Market. Border Market, Anna Regina Market, Lenora Market, number 79 Market at Corriverton. I think it's Skeldon area, 79 Market. There is one in, is it Blairmont Market or Rosignol Market in Region 5. Several markets across the country have been allocated several hundreds of millions of dollars, and we're not seeing the equivalent work. Ordinary people ply their trade there. Ordinary citizens go there and shop. Not everybody can go to Massey or these high-end supermarkets where the ministers go with their luxury vehicles, jump out, jump into the air-conditioned unit and purchase. Several people depend on these markets, and it is moving at a very slow pace in terms of the work, and I don't believe we're getting value for the work. We will go down to these markets, every one of these markets. MP Duncan, as you know, and myself and all our members of parliament and our national candidates, we have young Michael Richmond there and several others, and we have been moving from community to community. We're not a one-man show. We're not a one-band army. We are a team working together to ensure that we put all our strengths together and expose the corruption, the nepotism, the cronyism, and all the other isms you can put to the People's Progressive Party. And we will continue to expose and highlight for the Guyanese people to see that in the fastest growing economy, life has not gotten better. As it relates to local government elections.
Danish, just before you go on the same market issue and with a connection to local government elections as well. Now, the very same people are going to come to our Guyanese brothers and sisters and say what City Hall, for instance, is not doing and has not done. I want to underscore for Guyanese people, when the PPP had an opportunity to put you first, to put people first by fixing the markets that you buy from, that you inhabit, they diverted the money someplace else, and they will come and they will castigate City Hall for not fixing the very markets. And when it was in their power to fix those markets, they did something totally different. They diverted those monies to their own uses. I don't believe a word coming out of Ray Manachan's mouth that they warrant the money elsewhere. They put the money to their own use, and today those markets are still languishing in the same state that people found it in.
As it relates to local government elections, the People's National Congress reform is an elections machinery, and we are always prepared for elections. And we will be prepared for local government elections, as we will be for all of the elections coming up.
Thank you. At this time,
I'd like to.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I know you want to come.
I'll take your question.
Thank you. As far back as 1988, there was a report, and this is all over the place in the United States, all over, that newspapers were dying. One was that they were being overtaken by television. More recently, newspapers and television were being overtaken by social media. Now, Sherrod, you have an excellent social media platform, and there are some others. Has anyone given consideration for the accelerated use of such media platforms in the absence of favorable state media? Because favorable state media don't have the impact that the social media platforms. That's just one. I got one other question I wanted to ask.
Go ahead.
Well, or you want to answer the one first before I confuse anybody?
Let me start off first, because Sherrod is the social media expert on this panel. So I don't want to not give him the opportunity to speak directly to your question, but I just want to put in a factor that one must also consider in this growing network of social media. We have to also consider the generations in terms of our age. You speak about 1988, the report coming out. That's 1 year after, that's 1 year before I was born. So I say that to say that even though I am a young 36, there are several things that are happening in social media that my son has to teach me about, and he's just 13. So there are certain people who still rely on hard newspaper stories. I, for one, when I get up in the morning around 4, the first thing I do is go on the internet and read Kaichor News and Stabrook News. I will pass sometimes the Guyana Chronicle, but just to ensure that my morning goes smoothly, I will read them later on in the day. But I say that to say that you also have people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and they rely on newspapers for their story. We are indeed moving to more social media presence. We are indeed moving along the line of supporting the niche that exists there, but we also have to consider in all that we do that there are people who still rely on credible newspapers such as News and Stabrook News for their daily information. Cheryl.
Thank you, Ganesh. You know, it's not only restricted to newspapers going out of business, even online media. If you can stay ahead of the times, if you can have a mixture of mediums to engage members of the public, even online media houses can go out of business. And what this government has been doing is propping up even some of the online media houses that you might see or you might think that are doing well. And that is why government media, online, some media houses online, over even government media houses like NCN, like government radio stations, are given preferential treatment, as Ganesh pointed out earlier, to cover national events over government media, because this is what they're doing. They are propping them up. But if we are to leave media houses broadly, newspaper and online media, to market forces, lots of them might be out of business. Throwing text on Facebook is not online journalism. There is no more than throwing a Zoom up and having people join is online education. There's a way in which it has to be done. But I'll tell you this. Long now we see where this thing was going. More recent than 1986, we saw where this was going, and that is why we've been very strong that news entities like APNU, once we engage them as a government, we should honor those obligations that we have, and the rising tide, to put it simply, must float all boats. I have heard it was said, Mr. Vice President said, that what the government is interested in pushing its ads, its reach, and so it was opening the barn doors to online media houses to take a bite out of that pie. And I dare say, wearing another cap, we as well, we would like our piece of that pie as media entities, and we want to see that for everybody. What we do not want is unfair treatment, where there's a set of sacred cows who continue to be protected, who continue to be poured into, as against some other media entities. Let 1,000 flowers bloom, and that should be the attitude this government has to media, whether print or online media houses. Let 1,000 flowers bloom, but we don't think it's going to happen again, because we see where the government is going with policies and programs, and the need to avoid oversight. They want, as our young colleague, Mr. Richmond, pointed out, they want a certain kind of narrative out there, and so they will restrict media houses from the National Assembly. They will restrict media houses from covering certain events because they want information skewed in a particular direction.
Adam, Guyanese have to be careful what kind of Guyana they are creating. The government is doing one thing, yes, but we as Guyanese cannot sit silently and allow a Guyana that will ultimately destroy the future generation. I spoke earlier about online courses versus physical presence at lecture rooms and campuses and so on. And it is the same I will juxtapose to your question. You came from a school in journalism that taught you the importance of integrity as a journalist. I can also point out to Demerara Wave with, what's his name? Dennis Chabral. And there's several other noticeable journalists that have demonstrated credibility and integrity in the media fraternity, especially when it comes to covering current affairs from all ends, whether you're from the PPP, the PNC, the AFC, the WPA, name it, or even non-political organizations. But what we see from the People's Progressive Party is an attempt to shy away with integrity and credibility and put money into the pockets of some young journalists, sadly so, specifically to carry their narrative. And they're doing it with the political expectation of promoting them as good. But we're in a media fraternity and a landscape that is so broad that as much as they try to cover their bad, it is being exposed. Every ministry that I know of, every ministry has a media unit. And that media unit is supposed to be responsible for promoting the ministry's agenda. When you have outside people who are supposed to be associated with independent media houses, carrying a particular narrative and being paid by the state by taking monies from 6294 and 6284, which are line items in the budget book. On the other, it's dubbed other. So you cannot necessarily know what other is unless they deal with it as other. And they're paying these media houses to carry those narratives. It is a dangerous Guyana we're moving into. We have information where this government is literally paying the plane ticket of certain social media commentators to be present in Guyana on a regular basis to advance their position so that the diaspora can be kept informed. But the diaspora is not only going to be kept informed via that medium, there's several other avenues that are available for the same purpose. The point I am making is that we have to be careful what kind of Guyana we are allowing the People's Progressive Party to create. And the media fraternity should not shy away from integrity and being held to a standard that one can hold them in terms of respect. So my appeal is to the Guyanese people to be careful what you're creating. You may enjoy it today, but think about the future generation and if they will enjoy it too.
I love the fact that MP Maipa spoke about the standard. And I want to say that I can point to a lot of instances whereby we have some very good young journalists questioning something the government would do, some of their initiatives or some of their so-called plans on social media. And what I realize a lot of times is that we have a government that are not shy away from attacking online media houses. We have ministers who go out there on their social media platforms and literally go off on these entities. And I love the fact that MP Maipa spoke about it. We need to be very careful with what kind of Guyana we are trying to create, because we need to create a space, especially for our young and up-and-coming journalists, to not just be critical thinkers, but they must be able to put the right and credible, I'm not just talking about credible source, but also credible information out there on the internet. So again, I think adding to what Adam asked, it is imperative of us also to strike that balance between having our local newspapers and also keeping up with the pace of social media. It is very, very, very important because we need to have credible information out there. We need to ensure that our young journalists are not just ostracized or being paid to spread propaganda, in which the PPPC, are pushing for a lot of young journalists to do. We don't want that. We want credible information. We want to know what is occurring in Guyana, in every single region, in every municipality, and every single thing in Guyana. That is what we want. And this government they are paying young journalists to spread propaganda, to hide the facts, and to create this one Guyana that in all reality doesn't exist.
Thank you. Adam, do you still want to ask that final question? Because that will be the last question I'll take today. All right, Nori.
I think I had it going too long. I'll back off.
All right, thank you so much. I want to thank our media personnel, of course, for joining today's presser and all our viewing audience. This weekend, we will be celebrating International Women's Day. And, we just want to, ask the government, and we hope that women do enjoy this weekend. And it is a safe weekend for them, because we know the things that we usually see in this country, but we also call on the government to work with their institutions to ensure that International Women's Day is not just treated as a day. We know they'll have many activities happening all across the country for the day, but that we put into our policies and we see through those policies to ensure that women's rights and the situation they're placed in are looked after by the institutions that should engage them in a proper manner to see their safety and their well-being specifically during this time. So I want to thank you once again for joining today's press conference, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend.